Our first guest has spent his life in pursuit of the truth. He was hired as a New York Times reporter, New York reporter for the New York Times at the age of 25 and went on to become their youngest foreign correspondent. His new memoir covers everything from growing up on an Oregon farm to the genocide in Sudan. Here to share more, we welcome New York Times columnist, Pulitzer Prize winner, and author of Chasing Hope, A Reporter's Life, Kristof. Good to have you with us.
Great to be with you.
What a fascinating memoir. It covers so much. Like, how did you even keep it this short?
Well, I think my publisher would have whacked me if I tried to make it any longer.
Oh my gosh, it's incredible.
But it's, you know, we journalists are good at kind of meeting up at bars and exchanging stories, and I wanted to share some stories, but also kind of use it as a way to suck people into issues that I care a lot about.
Absolutely. Why do you call it Chasing Hope?
Boy, you know, as you know, I mean, there's just so much despair around.
Yeah.
And I think that despair becomes kind of paralyzing. And I managed to cover war and genocide and addiction and poverty and emerged with some notion that we should have hope. Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of challenges out there, but we are an amazing species when we get it right. And we need to kind of work together and push together to make progress, and I think we can.
You were blessed with some incredible parents.
Totally.
Talk to me about your mom and your dad.
The most important decision we make is when we choose the parents we're born to.
Yeah,
I chose
absolutely.
well.
Yeah.
So my mom was she just turned 92.
She's amazing.
This, you know, very strong woman. And one reason I've written a lot about women's rights and empowering women is because, you know, she's this incredible model, graduated from college at 18. Just really, and my dad was an Armenian refugee from Eastern Europe. His family had spied on the Nazis during World War II, some executed by the Nazis, some executed by the Soviets.
Wow.
And then was in concentration camps. And then in 1952, a family in Portland and the First Presbyterian Church of Portland sponsored his way to come to the U.S. He arrived, you know, not speaking any English, but just was so welcomed. He worked at a logging camp to learn English in the coastal range, then studied at Reed, and you know, his landlady, the thing that he always spoke about, his landlady, after he'd been here some months, she returned his rent, and she said, "I can't charge rent from a refugee." And it just totally won him over.
Do you feel like, I mean, his life really had an impact on who you became?
It certainly taught me about the way we in journalism can shine a light on people who need that light, who need that attention. And also, there was a French diplomat who saved my dad's life when my dad was in a concentration camp. And that was kind of against the rules. In my career, you know, I've given my editors gray hairs along the way.
Yeah.
And that's partly by pushing pretty close to the edge of what is appropriate for a journalist. And I think that is because, you know, I exist only because that diplomat broke the rules.
Right.
And when I see humans in desperate shape, I think we as journalists also have to be willing to go pretty close to that edge.
Yeah, absolutely. You were raised on the Oregon farm in Yamhill.
God's country.
Yes, it's so beautiful there. Absolutely so beautiful there. But even just working the farm, that taught you a lot, right? And the kids you got to know living there as well.
You know, on the farm we always say that shoveling manure is great preparation for covering politics. And,
there you go.
So I was
speaking
well
of which, handling, I think, bales of hay with your dad here.
That's right. Yeah, and it was, I think, really important also because Yamhill, you know, it's a small rural town, and it went through the ringer when good jobs disappeared and meth arrived. At this point, more than a third of the kids on my old school bus are gone from drugs, alcohol, and suicide.
You did a story on one of the kids, right?
I have, and it's something I talk about in Chasing Hope.
Yeah.
I don't think that we as a country have adequately faced up to the distress in rural America and in working class America more broadly.
Yeah, you talked about growing up with, I think his name was Dave, I'm not sure, but
Billy, probably.
Billy, right?
Yeah.
And then his alcoholism and his family, how you saw your family was very different than other families in Yamhill County, very different.
That's right, and
you had two intellectuals as parents.
That's right, and I mean, Billy brutally attacked a woman in Lincoln City. We spent money incarcerating him. I think that money might have been better spent educating him, supporting him when he was a kid, and I had friends who suffered greatly, but they also inflicted great suffering. And I think there's a kind of a broader failure, partly having to do with education in the state, that we can do better on.
You always wanted to be a writer, it seems. I mean, you wrote ever since you were little and continued. But let's move on to college and how you ended up at Harvard.
So, senior year, I'm trying to figure out where to apply to. Obviously, I'm going to apply to University of Oregon.
Initially, you thought you were going to be a photographer, right? Or
I was
wanted
in
to be-
danger of becoming a photographer. I was working part-time. I was working for the News Register of McMinnville part-time
Right.
during school, and I just loved photography. But fortunately, in those days, one had to develop film and get your
Right.
fingers all full of chemicals. So I thought, no, I'm going to be a writer. And then, of course, digital photography came along. But I applied to Harvard just to kind of a little, I'd never been to the campus, didn't know anything about it. And I think that I was kind of an affirmative action pick. I think that they wanted a rural farm kid, and there I was.
How do you, what do you attribute getting a job so young at New York Times?
Well, so
It was a drive. Clearly, you had a drive. Talent.
Yes, but I was also lucky in ways that kept building on itself.
Okay.
So, I was very lucky to get into Harvard. Then, partly because I went to Harvard, I was lucky to get a Rhodes Scholarship, and then that helped me get internships at the Washington Post and cover things globally, and then that helped get me the job at the New York Times. And so I felt like I had this bountiful good luck.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, I saw friends who maybe hadn't graduated from high school and then lost good union jobs in the area when factories closed, and then experimented with math, and their bad luck kept accumulating in the same way that my good luck kept accumulating.
You met your wife, Cheryl, while working there. She was an intern at the time, I think, right?
I totally married up.
But you guys covered Tiananmen Square.
We did. And we just had the anniversary of that on June 4th.
Yes.
That I was in that crowd of student protesters when the troops opened fire on that crowd that I was in. And you just never forget seeing a modern army use weapons of war on unarmed protesters.
Yeah.
And I also think, in this country, I think we have real challenges to democracy. And I think sometimes people in this country don't appreciate the democracy that we have, the guardrails, the referees, the institutions. And seeing those Chinese risking their lives for what we take for granted taught me a profound lesson.
And you helped to rescue a dissident, correct? And was the influence of your wife, Cheryl?
Yeah, she had a truer moral compass. There was a young man who had helped us cover Tiananmen democracy movement for the New York Times. Then, partly because of that, he was arrested. He was imprisoned, and then he escaped from prison and came to Beijing and asked us for help fleeing the country. As you know, one of the basic rules of being a foreign correspondent is you don't help an escaped felon flee the country.
Right.
But he's a 19-year-old kid. If we didn't help him, terrible things would have happened. And so, with Cheryl's encouragement, we helped him. He was able to get to Hong Kong. Then we flew to Hong Kong, helped him get to the U.S. And it was it's probably the most unprofessional thing I've ever done as a journalist, but it's truly one of the things I'm proudest of.
Yeah, absolutely. You talk too in the book about that you had so many close calls. How you're around is kind of amazing to me. You talk too about for approaching people who may kill you. You had a certain list of things you had to do.
Yeah.
When you traveled to all these different countries, all these different.
And I offer this advice, freely. I mean, if somebody may kill you, you want to shake hands with them. You want to look them in the eye. You maybe want to ask them about their family. Talk a little about your family. As a journalist, it's also useful to suggest interviewing them, because warlords tend to be kind of full of themselves, and they think they have a lot to offer the world. And so if you interview them, then they should understand that then if they kill you, that interview is never going to be published. So you try to incentivize them to keep you alive.
What are you? That's incredible. You also talked about wearing loose clothing, don't wear an expensive watch, that kind of thing. So when you're traveling and covering these kinds of stories, they don't see you as a target.
That's right. And you want to have a decoy wallet so that if a gunman wants to rob you, it's only polite to hand over a wallet, but you don't want to hand over all your money. So you want to have a decoy wallet with $30 and expired credit card. Yeah,
there you go. You ran for governor. Technicality really kept you out. What did you learn from that experience?
Oh, it was an amazing experience. I know I'd been politics adjacent for so long, and all of a sudden I was on the other side. You know, I think I went into politics thinking that the system was somewhat dysfunctional and left thinking, boy, it's even more dysfunctional than I thought. You know, partly because of the campaign finance system.
Yeah.
I think that one of Oregon's enormous challenges is we have to do a better job on education. The best metric for where a state will be in 25 years is its education from pre-K through higher education, and we fail a lot of students.
Yeah.
But the median campaign dollar in a primary comes from somebody who's 67 years old, who doesn't necessarily, you know,
he's not interested in education.
Is not really
it's
their
past
focus.
That. They're
That's
done
right.
with their kids, right?
Yeah. And I think that also we tend to focus so much on values and intentions, and there is at this point, you see it around Portland, a real gulf between our values and our outcomes. And I don't think we have enough serious conversation about our outcomes, whether in education, in housing, in public safety, and so on.
Do you think you'll run again?
I don't think so. Cheryl might kill me if I did. I've taken enough risks.
Yeah, you have 3 kids, and they're all doing really well. All very different choices they've made.
They're fantastic, and we started a small wine and cider business on the farm, and that's our way of pulling them into the family and getting them involved in the decision making.
That's so awesome. You have a book event, and that it's tonight at 7:30 at Revolution Hall in Southeast Arc. You need a ticket, but we're going to put all that information for everyone on our website. Here we go, on our website at katu.com. And the book again is called Chasing Hope: Reporter's Life. And you're going to be with Earl Blumenauer, Congressman Earl Blumenauer.
For whom I have enormous respect. A real
we
policy
love him.
wonk. Great
Thank
guy.
you so much.
Great to be with you.
Excellent reading. Excellent reading. We'll be right back with more AM Northwest. Don't go away.